Well, everybody, I'm watching the clock and I'm going to ring my little bell to call us all to order here. And I'm really excited. This is our first Zoom meeting of the year, and Mary will keep us all on schedule along with me because our Sergeant at Arms is stuck in the airport someplace or up in the air. We're not exactly sure where at this particular point. But I wanted to start off with saying and letting everybody know that we had our first board meeting of the year yesterday, and Gina Hall did an absolutely wonderful job of keeping us on schedule and going through the agenda. Very positive all the way along, and I want to report that we're off and running thanks to Jan Levy and her group on some of the changes that are going to be taking place as we go through the year. This is going to be an interesting time that we're all going to be sort of on pins and needles about, but it will all work out well. I want to remind everybody too that we have a really fun time next week for lunch down by we're going to be ending up going to the Coast Guard, but first we have,
Steelheads Alley.
yes, say again, Mary.
Steelheads Alley. It's right next to T-Mobile Stadium.
It's across the street from the stadium. It's a great venue. It should be fun to be down there and close to the Coast Guard where we are going to be celebrating Seafair, which we do each year. And this is just going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. But I want to make sure that everybody signs up for lunch for this. This is going to be an unusual way of signing up. Go to our Rotary calendar and you will be able to click on the lunch that we have for July 31st, and then you can pay that way for your lunch. After this July 31st, as Mary has said, we are going to end up using this Mayberry system, which everybody has had notice of, to buy tickets for the lunch. And as Mary also said, we are getting our box lunches at Plymouth from Fair Start. And you know, there's a reason for doing this too. Fair Start, instead of going to a for-profit organization, we decided to go to Fair Start, which is nonprofit, which is training people in a number of wonderful ways of dealing with restaurants and cooking, etc. And we're going to be promoting them through our box lunches, which fits in perfectly with what our Rotary requirements, our Rotary caring for others is all about. So just wanted to let everybody know all about that as we move forward in our program today. And I know people are continuing to join our group here, and the more the merrier online, and hopefully this will work out every month where we do one Zoom meeting a month. Right now, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our treasurer, Jeff Parker, who is going to give us a little bit of background, an update on our finances here at Rotary, which is something we really need to be worrying about, and that our Future Vision Task Force is really right up on and dealing with. So I'm turning it over to you, Jeff. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thanks very much, John. Can you hear me, everyone? Mary, we're good? So yes, I'm the treasurer for the John Bridge year. It just started a few weeks ago, but our finances had to be all in place well ahead of that. So the Future Vision Task Force had a clear mandate from the results of the surveys. And I'll quote the beginning: we need significant, strategic, meaningful change to the club. And a lot of that revolves around the finances. So our mandate was pretty pretty broad. So the finance committee met 3 times before the year, and this budget has been proposed and now fully approved, and it's in place. And we really wanted to recognize that we're going to have different types of meeting, different locations, more affordable meetings, a streamlined budget, and right sizing operations. And probably most importantly, the pay-as-you-go aspect that we've already talked about. It takes all of us a little time to get used to, but Mary said we've done surprisingly well with that change, and so we'll all get used to that RSVP model, and that helps us because we went from standard dues were $160 a month per member, and now it's 60. So whether you're a young Rotarian, retiree, it's the same for everyone, and so that's lowering the cost for some, it's maintaining it for others. And that was really important because then we've separated out what we're paying for the meals and what we're paying to run the club. And you'll see that when we get to the summary of operations when we go there. And also notable is that we worked a lot to reduce the costs of the club. We've lowered our budget income and expenses by nearly 30%. I'll say that again, almost 30% lower income projected and 30% lower expenses. And if you've ever run budgets, you know that there's a lot that went into that to get there. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions later. We don't have a great deal of time. This is going to be the fastest 5 minutes in finance here today, but call, email, get me at a meeting. We can talk more about this because I'm sure there'll be questions. So, and with that, let's see, do you want to pull up the summary slide there? So you can see, thanks to Kathy Gibson's accounting background and leadership, we've separated out the meetings on top and the operating of the club on the bottom. So the profit and loss for meetings is listed there. And you can see, I'll spend just a very brief time. So we only have 4 meetings projected at the Westin and similar. So those meetings cost more money, to be point blank. And so we're going to have a lot more meetings at lower cost venues. Instead of $50 a lunch at the Westin, it'll be $40 at Plymouth. Although we actually think that's got to be lower going forward. That's just the cost we had to set as we implement the changes and move forward with them. Also notable that we're going to have the evening fellowship, great programs set up by Stephen Morris. We had a wonderful one last week already. They're all going to pay for themselves. That's a key to this budget. And then as the meeting sponsorships listed there, again, a lot of data, but it's Carl Benke stepped up and underwrote much of the year. Thanks very much to him, but also Dorothy Bullitt and Bloodworks and hopefully other corporate sponsorships. So all of these costs on the far right there, you can see in red, don't cover the full cost of the meeting. So even with these changes, we have to cover it from other places. And a lot of that is the audiovisual. Our costs went up a lot over the last few years, and audiovisual tripled in cost. So that was one of the reasons to explore new methods. On the bottom, you'll see notable in blue, we have investments that are about 520,000 stocks, bonds, and cash. They made about 60,000 last year. So we said, let's pull 35,000 of the income, not the principal, just part of the earnings, similar as you would with an endowment, and use those to implement these changes. So part of that is 15,000 for Mary to use to smooth the changes to the new meeting structure, 5,000 for PR and advertising, and then 15,000 to explore our lease. So all told, if you go to the lower right, we'll have a profit for the year as projected. And this is not proposed, this is the past approved budget. And that is largely to do to that capital expenditure that we pulled in. Without that, it'd be about a $7,000 loss, but we think actually we'll make that up in different places. So that's the very quick version of all this. I don't know if I have any time, Mary, for questions now, but I suspect I'll have more at another venue. So.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I think that if there are any questions right now, the best way to deal with this is to send Jeff an email, and I'm sure he'll answer those questions that you might have. I want to thank you for your update, Jeff. I think it's important for all of us to know about the finances. And one of the situations that we really will need, and this is something that I'm just going to editorialize about, when we meet off with our boxed lunches, it is important for everybody to realize that there's a cost involved in that. And even if you decide for some reason you don't want one of our boxed lunches, you still have to pay something because there are expenses beside just the food that we have to cover at each venue that we are at. And Plymouth is much less expensive, but that still needs to be covered. We still have to pay them. We still have to pay the audio visual. And so from that standpoint, we roll that into the boxed lunches and hope that everybody will buy the boxed lunches. If you don't buy the boxed lunches, you probably will have to pay for them anyway. But we'll move forward on that and discuss that later. And I'll let Jeff take the con on that, speaking in Navy terms. All right. I want to thank you, Logan Riley, for all of our meeting reporting, and hopefully you make me look halfway decent in the notes that you take on this, and of course all of our speakers. And at this particular point, I'm going to turn it back over to Mary to talk about any of our guests that have decided to show up on Zoom.
Yes, so we have Jamie Homer of the Boys and Girls Club. We have Leo Flor, who's our main program speaker. They are not guests because they're club members. We have Laurie Black and Kendrick Davis of the Rotary Boys and Girls Club. And then I see Marcella Navarro. So welcome to the call, y'all. And from there, we will go ahead and welcome Kendrick, who will introduce Laurie Black for the SRSF Short program.
All right, thank you, Mary.
That's great. And before Kendrick gets started, before you get started, Kendrick, I just want to mention to everybody, in case you don't know, Kendrick has replaced Patrick Carter as the ED at our Rotary Boys and Girls Club. But more than that, as Laurie Black has mentioned to me, Kendrick also has a responsibility for the Rainier Vista Boys and Girls Club and the one at Lowell Elementary School. So you've got more than just our Rotary Boys and Girls Club that you have to watch out for. So given that, Kendrick, go right ahead and introduce Laurie.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm thrilled to introduce Laurie Black, our president and CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of King County. She's been leading our organization for the past 6 years. Prior to her role at the clubs, she was with Nordstrom's for 35 years. I've been fortunate enough to call her a mentor since coming home to King County a few years ago. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you, Kendrick. That was awesome. Okay, everyone. Oh, thank you, Mary, for doing this for me. First of all, I'm going to start with this because just in case I run out of time at the end, I want to start by thanking everyone at Seattle Rotary and Seattle Rotary Foundation for all you do for our Rotary Club, not just the financial staff and support, but the presence in the club when we need you the most. So this club makes a difference in about 800 kids a year in the Capitol Hill area, and for youth and families, just makes a big difference. And your support is just so much needed, and we thank you so much. Okay, so we're starting on the first slide. I apologize if you can't really see it. It was my fault. I didn't send it to Mary in the correct way. So I'm just going to highlight some things on the slides. I'm not going to read them. So if you get a little mixed up, that's probably the reason why. So I want to tell you that the Rotary Youth Foundation was established in 1939 in the Plymouth Church in downtown Seattle. In 1954, the Rotary Foundation built the Rotary Club that we're in today. So since 1954, however many years that is, we have estimated that we've served over 35,000 youth in this club. And if you've been to the club, it's not a large club. So it's a lot of kids and families that we're serving. Okay, next, Mary. Since 2017, Seattle Rotary Foundation has provided almost 125,000 from the Rotary Club Fund. That's an endowment that sits in our account to fund operations for the club. as well as nearly another about $1 million for programs and club improvements. So I want to tell you, you should feel so good about this. These funds are crucial for us to provide a safe and healthy environment for our kids and staff, especially because this club has one of the highest numbers of scholarships that we give to youth that can't afford to come to the club. Last year, I think it was $165,000 that was funded to get kids to the club. It's about 75% of our youth in the club get a scholarship. Okay, Mary, next one. The club has an advisory board made up of 19 people that support our staff and help raise money for the club. The Rotary Cab, I'll tell you, is one of the oldest and strongest club advisory boards in our organization. My husband and I were a part of the club advisory board about 20 years ago when our boys played basketball at the club. We were recruited by Rotarians. I don't know if anybody knows Tom Hirsch and Chris Clark. They recruited us to the club advisory board, and we basically learned, that was my first board I'd ever been on, and I won't tell you how old I was then, but I learned from Chris and Tom how to be an effective and impactful board member. So I want to tell you, we're always looking for new board members. If you're interested, please contact Kendrick. You can email him. His email is on our website, or you can contact me or tell Mary or anyone, Sarah, and we'll get you connected. At least get you to come visit the club and see. Okay, first of all, I just want to tell you, our club is always open. Always something going on there. Kendrick's laughing because it's a lot of work to keep the club open every day, but we are always serving kids, families, the community, just all sorts. So this club is always open and well used. Okay, next one, Mary. Okay, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but our club never closed during the pandemic. So when the schools closed down, like March 13th or whatever that date was, our club opened the next day and was available for all of our families, and especially the families of essential workers. So since the pandemic, we have more kids than ever in the club, and it's basically about 50 kids a day during the school year, and then even more with our athletic programs. Okay, Mary, next. This club continues the key programs that were a part of the original Seattle Rotary Foundation focus, as well as we continue to evolve programs to meet the kids' needs. So I want to tell you that Rotary Club, being one of our most important clubs, we test many things at this club. They're kind of the first to get new programs and new focuses of the organization. Okay, next one. These are highlights of some of the programs. Let me tell you, in the middle of there is our reading tutoring program. Several months ago, Seattle Rotary actually featured this program in one of your, I think it was like an afternoon event, and it was at the Seattle Library. You featured this program. We actually signed up with this reading tutoring program this past March and provided reading support for our kids. We'd heard from our program directors, really in all clubs, not just Rotary, that kids are not able to read today. I'm not sure if most of you know this, but Seattle Public Schools has 2 goals. One of those 2 goals is that all of their 3rd graders will be reading at 3rd grade level by 3rd grade. And you may think, oh, most of the kids are probably reading at that level right now. No, less than half are reading at 3rd grade level by 3rd grade. So we've signed up for this reading tutor program, and the Rotary Club was one of the first to launch it. And I actually got to sit in on a couple sessions with volunteers and kids. And it was just so special at what was happening. And one of our one of our volunteers worked with the youth who had food insecurity. And so she would bring food with her to the reading session. And then the little girl and the volunteer would eat together while they were doing the reading program. It's really just so special. And we're going to be continuing this in the fall. So if anyone, Sarah Weaver, I think you're going to sign up for this, right? If anyone wants to sign up, please just let us know. Call the club and we'll get you signed up. It doesn't start till really October. Okay, so next thing that's very special is since the pandemic, the needs of youth have just shifted. There's so much anxiety, stress, just about all these things that were created from virtual learning. And so we, about 3 or so years ago, responded with mental health programs. And we partnered with 2 youth mental health agencies, Brooks Powers and Seneca, to work with our staff and kids on their mental health needs. Rotary was one of the first to launch actual mental health therapy for kids with a mental health therapist. So we have a therapist that has an office in the club, and she has a full schedule of seeing youth. We do not charge for this. And it has been highly successful. Okay, I'm getting there. Wait, what time is it? Okay, I'm going faster, sorry. Okay, athletics is offered at Boys and Girls Club Rotary. It's very special there. We have a Rotary style basketball program that's been centered at Rotary for, 20 years for 3rd to 8th grade. And we also have Rotary style high school men's basketball program that plays throughout the country. They're sponsored by Nike. We partner with them, and it is really an amazing program if you ever want to come see a game. Last year, 2023, last year, Paulo Banquero, Rotary Club kid, Rotary style player, was drafted #1 in the NBA draft. And Paulo was just at the club doing a short film for ESPN. And Paulo has on his arm, I think it is 19th and Spruce, which is our address of the club, tattooed on his arm. Okay, we can keep going because I think I'm at time. You can read that. And I also provided lots of statistics on this. So if anyone has any questions, you can read the statistics later. So anyway, I want to just thank you. You make a difference in the lives of kids and families.
Well, thank you very much, Lori. We really appreciate that. And Kendrick, this is one of the, and Tom Hershey, who is on our on the Zoom with us. Thank you for what you started in all of this. How important it is for us to be giving back to the community and to know especially about the mental health attachment, given the shootings that have taken place in the Central District recently. The kids need this, and this is what we are so grateful for you providing, Lori and Kendrick, and we can all pat ourselves on the back for what we are doing through our Seattle Rotary Foundation. Vicki, we will keep this up. This is our platinum program, is the Seattle Rotary Boys and Girls Club. So thank you very much again, Lori, for that. And now I have the opportunity to introduce our member, a longtime member, and the person who runs our Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce and is helping us bring Seattle back to economic growth, Rachel Smith, who's going to introduce our program today. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you so much, John, and appreciate the kind words. And I have to say, it is truly a delight for me to have the opportunity to introduce my friend and former colleague, Leo Flor. So Leo and I met working at King County, and in our leadership roles there, me as deputy executive and him as director of the Department of Community and Human Services, we worked very, very closely. We were the kind of close where we relied on each other to solve big problems and seize big opportunities, and also keep each other kind of propped up when the going got tough, which it often did. And we've got the battle scars, the ballot box victories, and the friendship, I would say, to prove that. In the most challenging times, Leo oversaw really the sort of critical components of King County's COVID-19 response, including truly life-saving isolation and quarantine operations, the move from congregate shelters to hotel-based emergency housing, and the nearly $400 million in rental assistance that helped nearly 40,000 households remain housed. When it comes to the sort of unprecedented wins to support our communities most vulnerable, Leo and his team developed the successful proposals for the Crisis Care Levy in 2023, the Health Through Housing Levy in 2020, renewing the Best Starts for Kids Levy in 2021, and Vet Seniors and Human Services in 2023, all of which passed with strong majorities. And through all of that, he was just one of my primary co-conspirators, partners in crime, comrade in arms. And while many people know Leo through that King County role, before that, he was actually a legal aid attorney, and he served more than 8 years as an airborne ranger qualified U.S. Army infantry officer, including 12 months as a Stryker platoon leader in Iraq and 15 months as an airborne company commander in Afghanistan. He is impressively a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and holds a master's and law degree from the University of Washington, all of which is reasons that he is one of the most extraordinary leaders I have ever had the pleasure of working with. So, John Bridge, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but you are more than welcome.
Well, I can just add one little thing. Leo and I deal with a lot of veterans benefits, and that comes from both of our service in the military. Leo from his being a ranger, and me playing Navy in all of my 31 years of active type duty, and really care about him in that area. But more importantly, he was a fellow of the Equal Justice Works when he first finished law school. And Equal Justice Works, just so all of you guys know, is our program, our next Zoom program with Verna Williams, who is the CEO of Equal Justice Works, which does fantastic stuff. And Leo might just sort of tell you a little bit about that when he talks about a completely different subject. But it's sort of great to have a Leo here, knowing that our program next month will be part of what his background is all about. So with all of that, Leo, take it away. I'm sorry I talked too much, but this is just sort of exciting for me.
One, I can't wait to get the opportunity to introduce both of you in the future and embarrass you profusely. Rachel is an extraordinary leader who I think that we're really lucky to have. And the battle scars are there, but I think we did good work together. And then John draws some false equivalency because I think he outranks me significantly. And I did notice the last time I saw him at the parking lot at the UW, his military uniform still fits him. I cannot say the same for mine. So, but a pleasure to join you all today. And just this larger group, I believe fervently in sort of stating up front the whole purpose of what we're going to talk about. And I think there's two things. One, this group, which I now understand is called the Rotary or the Seattle Four, is a microcosm in many ways of the exact principle I'm going to talk about, which is that when you bring together sort of an extraordinary moment, extraordinary talent, and the right combination of people, not only do you have an opportunity to do something, but you have a responsibility to do something. And the way that Rotary approaches that, where that responsibility is then transferred on to making the community a better place over the long term, is exactly where we're headed with the way that we want to host the World Cup. So real quick, of the folks who are on the screen, just so I can focus the time correctly, has anybody here not received a sort of introductory talk on the World Cup? Because I do understand that some of my colleagues have joined Rotary previously. Anybody not heard the sort of initial spiel? All right, we got a couple of hands there. So I will spend a little bit of time on that before getting to the focus on legacy. All right, the point on this slide, other than that it's cool that things move, is the World Cup is being hosted in Seattle, but this is a regional and a statewide responsibility and opportunity for what is truly the largest international tournament in the world. The outline, so that you know where we're going. First, we're going to spend a little bit of time emphasizing just how big an event the World Cup is. Talk a little bit about how we're set up locally to host and administer it, but then really focus the end here on what does it mean to have the world's largest sporting event come to our city? What responsibilities does that create, and how are we thinking about those? And I'm here to share actually some of the ways we're thinking about that specifically with you all right now, for the purpose, hopefully, of getting some testing some of these ideas, getting some feedback, and coming away with stronger versions of them. Won't spend a whole lot of time here. The point, I think, of this slide is I have been astonished at the level of attention that soccer generates relative to anything else that I have been associated with. I've been the person who comes into community sometimes and cites a shelter. You'll get 300 people in the room excited when you come to a community and talk about shelters, but it just pales in comparison to the level of interest and frankly enthusiasm that soccer as a sport generates. It's a big event. Some of you will have seen this slide before. The least watched World Cup game at the last World Cup had more people watching it than the Super Bowl, than any showing of the Super Bowl ever. The most watched single game at the last World Cup had 1.5 billion people tune into it. Over the course of the whole World Cup, 5 billion individual human beings tuned into some part of one of those games. More than half the humans on Earth pay attention to the World Cup to the point where they watch some piece of it. That creates opportunity and responsibility. It would sound like puffery to say that this is the largest tournament that has ever taken place on Earth, but absent the dinosaurs having done something that I'm not aware of, it's just sort of empirically true. So it's not hyperbole. One reason for that is practical. The tournament has historically been 32 teams. It's the first time it goes to 48 teams who will participate. It's the first time that we'll have 3 nations co-hosting the tournament together. So Canada, the US, and Mexico. I won't list all the cities, but I think in particular, noticing that Vancouver, BC, Seattle, and then the Bay Area and LA, we sort of make up the Western group of cities, and there'll be teams moving between us. And in fact, we're anticipating substantial movement in between Seattle and Vancouver. And when I say substantial, our current estimates are that we'll have somewhere around 750,000 people who will attend a game. And then, as we said, billions of people in the aggregate will tune in to just the games that we will play, that we'll host here in Seattle. And again, what a responsibility. If you can read everything on this chart, then you have perfect vision. If you can't read everything on this chart, then I'll pull out the things that I think are significant. This is the match schedule. We have 6 matches here in Seattle, and a couple of them really jump out. But before I get into that, we know that the dates on which all the matches will happen, you'll notice that all of them are on weekdays, although one of those weekdays is a holiday. We don't yet know the times, so we don't know when in the day these matches will happen. We do know that there won't be more than 1 match in Seattle on one day. And then the only team we know that will be here for sure is that the U.S. men's national team will play their second game here in Seattle on June 19th. So that's Juneteenth. The U.S. team here on what is a uniquely American holiday. And again, knowing that hundreds of millions of people will be tuned in, hundreds of thousands of people will have visited, that creates a responsibility to really tell the world, other parts of our own country and state, about what Juneteenth is, and that's one of our initiatives. Same thing around Pride, and the ability to really, tell a story and frankly draw a contrast to previous editions of the tournament where things like wearing a rainbow armband into a stadium were controversial. And then, as I talked about with Vancouver, another interesting fact that's not immediately apparent from this calendar, just looking at it, is that we will have our friends in Vancouver are offset from us on almost every match. So match here, then match there the next day, match here, then match there 2 days. The only exceptions are the 24th and the 26th of June when we'll each host matches. And so we expect substantial sort of international travel between Seattle and our area and then our neighbors to the north. World Cup footprint, not really the focus here, but just to say, when I say it's a statewide event, not only because the interest is statewide, but there is the potential to have locations statewide. One of the things to really understand is these team base camps. So these are places where national teams will be assigned to train for up to a month before the tournament starts. So when we talk about the impact being more than just the 6 games, an example, say the Japanese national team were assigned to a base camp in Spokane due to the sort of geographic proximity, and what we know about that fan base, I would expect that we would have tens of thousands of Japanese fans coming to Spokane in May and June of next year. Now, that's just an example. I can't say, that's not necessarily where that team will be assigned, but that's the type of interest that will occur and effect that will have even in parts of the state that seem to be far from where the games themselves will be played. I don't work for FIFA, so that's a thing that is useful to say for a number of reasons, but there's FIFA itself and they manage the tournament. There is the local organizing committee, and that's where I work. We're a team of 6 folks. I do think some of you have heard in different forms from my boss, CEO Peter Tomazawa. Our job is really the local planning in the community as opposed to programming what will happen inside of the stadium. Inside of the stadium is FIFA. We're really what happens in the community and all the connective tissue as we plan. Governments as well, they stay intact. We don't supersede or sort of gain any powers from governments that we wouldn't already have, but we work very closely with all of them. The local organizing committee, the LOC, this is a sort of graphic depiction of the things that we're really focused on, again, primarily outside of the stadium, but here within the stadium neighborhoods, within the city, within the county, and then again, statewide. These are the areas that we're responsible for now. We'll really jump into the legacy part of it, which is where I think there's just a tremendous consonance with your all's purpose and values as an organization. So when we start to put structure to legacy, some of you will have seen this before, but we're really thinking about it across 6 pillars. I won't exhaustively describe each of them, but human rights is one to spend a little bit of time on. So how do we create a safe and inclusive environment here for fans, for visitors, for residents, for workers? And so we're bringing together committees. I'll show you a couple of the potential projects that we're already starting to move forward on that will really be able, I think, to show that a sporting event like this can promote human rights. Some sporting events, in the past have had different reputations and in some cases well-earned. But the way that we're approaching the World Cup here, and because we're not building massive amounts of infrastructure also, I think that there are strong differences. And then just the sort of values and legal regime that exists already in our nation, in our state, really make this a much different calculation than, for example, when the World Cup was hosted in Qatar. We're really taking a look at accessibility, and I'll give a cool example of that, but one of, I think, the things that I heard about the Rotary Boys and Girls Club that you all focus on is the power of access to sports, to teams, to teamwork. Soccer should be the most accessible sport in the world. You just need a ball and a little bit of ground. And so how do we really make that actual is another of our goals with an eye towards long-term impact. And then community is the last one that I'll sort of emphasize here. What we mean by community increasingly here is recognizing the fact that with the number of people that will come, the amount of attention that will come with the World Cup, we have a responsibility to organize our community in a way where the benefit of that is both maximized and distributed so that the whole community bears the benefit of hosting the World Cup. And we've got some really excited, I think, exciting strategies to do that that I'm eager to share. Before getting into those examples, and we're nearing the ends of the slide so that we have a lot of time to ask questions. It's easy, I think, to talk about your ambitions, or for me to talk about our ambitions, legacy, human rights, children. What I like to spend my time on is how do you sort of move from the ideas to the implementation, from the ambition to the action. Legacy only happens if you actually do stuff. And so my role is how do we convert a lot of our ambitions into actions. And there are a couple of factors that really weigh into that as we approach. One is that I've just spent a bunch of time telling you how the World Cup is the biggest event in the world, and it's about 3.5 weeks long. So there's this weird contrast between massive percentages of humanity and the event itself is not that long. So we have to figure out ways, and the local organizing committee actually vaporizes in August of 2026. So we won't even exist 3 or 4 weeks after the games end. So we have to figure out ways to build local partnerships so that we can use the moment of the World Cup, but then use it to amplify or accelerate what local partnerships or local organizations were already doing and can continue to do. Another is legacy is both a question of what we do and how we do it. If you like neat phrases, we have to both do the right things for legacy, but then we have to do everything in a way that promotes a good legacy for the event and for the community. So that's another of the factors that we're considering as we take a look at specific actions. We also have to understand what we are. A local organizing committee is not a government. We're not going to be really good at changing ordinances. We don't have a budget anywhere near, the monthly operating expenses of a single city or county department. But what we do have is the ability to draw the attention of hundreds of millions of people. And so really understanding what our strategic advantage is and then doing activities that take advantage of that instead of trying to be something that we're not. And then the last, and I already said it, there's no legacy without action. And so even though the World Cup feels far away still, although I think it's 687 days or something like that now, and it's closer than I care to admit, we really have to have locked in our plans and be executing by the end of this year. And so hopefully the list that you'll see here in a moment reflects some of that. All right, I put potential here in a different color just so that in the interest of being specific enough to be interesting and building on previous presentations that this group has received, I can get a little bit more specific. But in almost every one of these cases, we're still in those negotiations and we're actually still actively raising the funds that will be necessary to implement these. But a couple to draw attention to. One, we are super proud of the fact that for the first time in the history of a FIFA World Cup, a indigenous tribe has become a commercial sponsor and partner of the event. And so I get to work very closely with the Puyallup tribe. And in fact, we're going to be out on the water here in about a week filming with FIFA. The tribe's hope is that when we talk about an iconic Seattle image, not only will we see fish being thrown at Pike Place, not only will we see the Space Needle, but people will think of Coast Salish people in their canoes on the water with the mountains and the city in the background. One point of pride, the next bullet down, we are working and almost now under full agreement to work with the Seattle Metro Chamber to build out small business kits for the state, for small businesses, again, to be able to take advantage of the economic opportunity that will come with the World Cup. So the chamber has a really cool program of business connectors in place. They'll create the curriculum, and then we'll be funding specific people inside of the stadium neighborhoods, SoDo, the Chinatown International District, and Pioneer Square, so that they can provide the sort of bottom-up expertise. So you get top-down curriculum, experience, statewide reach, and then you get bottom-up hyper-local connection to the people. And that's one of the ways that we're going to really focus in on how do you create economic benefit for local small businesses. The second one, or the third one that I'll mention here, because people just sort of get into it, we are developing an app. We're under contract for this right now. It's going to be a game. John, this will allow you to continue your interest in Pokemon Go. But the idea is high digital tokens that will be soccer themed throughout the community in places where we want to drive people, Wing Luke Museum, Northwest African American Museum, particular small businesses. Make it so that as you accrue those tokens, you become eligible to win merchandise or perhaps to win tickets to World Cup games. So we think that these, those prizes will drive a lot of interest. And what we hope to be able to do is, for a number of reasons around pedestrianization, sustainability, dispersion of crowds over larger spaces, driving economic benefit, and then just fun, using this app to really move people through the community so that they see that Seattle is more than its stadium. Although we're proud of our stadiums, we got a whole downtown that people should see and understand. You might see other things on this slide that are of interest, and we can come back to it in questions, but I won't presume to read all of them in sequence to you. Starting or ending where we started, which is the reason I was attracted to this job is that the World Cup is cool, but my boss was serious about how do we make sure that 20 years from now, folks remember this event the same way that we remember right now the World's Fair in 1962. And it doesn't hurt that 62 and 26 are a neat little inversion. So there's some graphic opportunity there. And then the very last thing I'm going to leave you with before the slide with all the emails. There is a very good possibility, although it's not confirmed, that next year an event called the FIFA Club World Cup would come to Seattle. We don't know that. But the Seattle Sounders have qualified. So the question is only, will Seattle host any of those games? The reason I put this very sort of direct slide up there is that they're just different competitions, although their names are very similar. The local organizing committee isn't involved. I think it's a smaller scale event, although still a big event, but it's probably more comparable to like a popular Seahawks game or the Champions League game that the Seattle Sounders won a couple of years ago. And what we don't want is anyone to say, like, I've sat through 4 versions of this presentation and they were all about 2026. And now I just found out that the World Cup is happening in 2025. You are now all equipped to disabuse people of that slightly mistaken notion. And I appreciate your help in doing that. So here is the email slide. I went through that pretty fast for the purpose of hopefully preserving time for questions. And it's really just a pleasure for me to be here. And again, I think your organization is a perfect example of what we're trying to do with the World Cup.
Great. Thank you, Leo. I'm going to go ahead and start asking you some questions. It sounds like you still have plans kind of developing around protecting sex trafficking with the World Cup. Do you have any more specifics about that you could mention to us right now?
Yeah. One is that we do have some initial ideas and are going to be continuing to refine and contract those, I think, by the end of this year. But it's really falling in one, trafficking. We think of both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and those two things can become intertwined or separate depending on who you're talking to, but we're looking at both of those. The best case is to prevent it. So prevention is the sort of first of 3 ways that we really approach it. And I think that's the appropriate emphasis. And prevention in many ways looks a lot like education. And so there are some local organizations that actually have national reputations for being able to create the curriculums that can train security workers, folks who work at the port or the airport, hospitality workers to identify the types of conditions that are permissive to sex trafficking or labor trafficking and to eliminate those. The second is mitigation. So when it happens, how do you like catch it and stop it in the moment? Again, a lot of that is probably training and then creating the connection from observers out in the field, people who would see it, but then knowing who to call to actually go in and stop it when it's happening. And so there's a connection with law enforcement community groups there that we are starting to build out that would then sort of take the education to prevent and then convert that into actionable knowledge if you see it happening. And then the third is helping folks who are survivors of trafficking and making sure both that if it happens or when it happens, or for folks who have previously experienced it, we're continuing to provide services that help them recover as they are survivors, but also that they are informing the prevention and mitigation strategy. So I think ultimately we're going to be looking to create and purchase curriculums get them into the areas in which we're contracting for services, hospitality, security, behavioral health, social services, and then really trying to find those organizations that have the expertise and the survivor perspective to make sure that what we're putting out there is state of the art and best practice.
Wonderful, Leo. I think we have time for one or two more questions. The second one is from Jeff Parker. Do you have any info and timing on ticketing and volunteering yet?
So tickets, of all the questions we get, tickets is actually the number one question. I did have up on the slide, and I'll put it back in. The only way that we know how to get tickets right now is for folks to register interest with FIFA. The local organizing committee doesn't control the tickets. There will eventually be the ability to purchase the tickets. I don't know exactly when that is, but the thing that we tell everyone is if the first step that you can do now is to register interest with FIFA. I expect that actual ticket purchasing is going to either happen very late this year or start early next year, but that's supposition as opposed to insider knowledge.
Nice. Well, Jeff Parker, you better get your alerts on your email for that when that happens. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of combine Skip and Dorothy's questions into one question. So Dorothy's question is, are you working with the city to ensure a more vibrant retail presence downtown than we've had in the past 5 years? And then Skip Calkins is asking about if are there any ongoing facilities that are going to be, built infrastructure that are going to be the legacy of the World Cup here, similar to like we had for the Seattle World's Fair with the Space Needle?
So we're not building a Space Needle. We sort of luckily are passively taking advantage of some tremendous changes that have happened in our downtown core and will come to fruition over the next 2 years. So I was just on the waterfront yesterday with the Friends of the Waterfront. What we're going to be able to unveil and show to the community that will start to open later this year and then continue into 2025 is a world-class waterfront. And so that is an example of a lot of infrastructure that we're going to take advantage of. We're going to have light rail converging from longer distances from 3 directions into a station that is a 5-minute walk from the stadium by 2026. So that's another example. We already have a state-of-the-art stadium that is a sort of jewel amongst the stadiums that are hosting events at Lumen Field. So it's a long way of saying we actually decided when we took a look at what we are, again, this is that competitive or strategic advantage question. We're not going to be the best agency to build buildings, and 2 years is not really enough time to do anything impactful in that regard. So we are looking at things that are much more human and social legacy. I had a slide about kids, and the measure ultimately of the World Cup is what does today's 8-year-old remember when they're 28. And if you're 8 years old right now, and I don't see any 8-year-olds on here, but I don't mean to make assumptions. You have grown up in a world where the only thing that you have been inundated with at least the sort of levels of government is division. You don't know a world if you're 8 or 10 where you see prominent examples of unity and teamwork and people coming together. And I think for some of us older folks, we almost take that for granted that at least at some point in the distant past that was possible. We have, I think, an opportunity with this World Cup to show some of the kids that haven't experienced that it's not just some myth in the history books, that at some point people got along together and sort of come together and accomplish great things. And so that's what I mean by a social legacy, social example, and soccer, again, I agree with it or disagree with it. This is a unifying thing like nothing I have seen before. If soccer was up for election, it would win with like 95% of the vote. It's just a measure of enthusiasm that we would be foolish not to take advantage of. And again, it's not just for commercial purposes, although we've got a lot going on there. This is to show people in our society, to remind us that we can actually do big things together and show the world, I think, what Seattle in particular can do in that regard.
Awesome, Leo. I'm going to turn it back over to John for him to give his thanks for having you today.
Well, thank you very much, Leo. This has been super. We appreciate you taking time out to spend with us. I want to invite you to join our Rotary Club. This is the perfect time, and I will make sure that we send you the little packet, and I'm happy to be your prime sponsor, and we'll go forward that way. And I've got a whole bunch of people here that I know are willing to sponsor you, and starting with Rachel. So we'd love to have you on board. We're also going to present you with a gift of some harvest against hunger food stuffs, which will be provided to our community on your behalf. And thank you again so much for being here. I also want to thank REB Enterprises and Bloodworks Northwest for their ongoing sponsorship of our meetings. Good. That's lovely to see all those people giving blood. I keep getting calls for that. I just have to get there myself. So we are looking forward to all of our participation in a number of community events. And as you can see on the screen, we will be at Plymouth Church starting on August 7th for our first meeting with Dr. Lee Hood. I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Mary to give any more information that on our upcoming programs.
Well, it's going without me, so I'm just going to rock and roll with it. So we've got Wednesday, August 21st at Plymouth Church, Dr. Ben Danielson. He's a pediatrician and clinical professor of pediatrics at the University of Washington School of Medicine. We have a Rotary Mariners event on the 27th from 5:30 to 9 with a traditional canoe excursion. That's Nicole Klein is hosting that. And then Wednesday, August 28th, we have a Zoom only meeting again with Berna Williams. But just the last thing I'm going to tell you all is please make sure to register today for our Seafair meeting next week, because I'm giving Steelheads Alley all of our information tomorrow morning. So I need to have a firm count tomorrow morning. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, John.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. I think that we have managed to go through a Zoom meeting without too many problems, without a hitch. Thank you, Mary, for all of your hard work on this. I'm all excited about it. I know that Vicki has a big meeting tomorrow with her board that we'll be telling everybody about come next sometime on our future meetings, because we want to let all of our members know what our boards, both the board for our Rotary Club as well as the foundation, what goes on, so that everybody knows and everybody can be part and parcel of what goes on in our club. Finishing off today and watching the time, because I'm playing Sergeant at Arms along with Mary today. I like to talk about occurrences that happened on October 24th. So I'm going to roll back the calendar to 1567 when Mary, Queen of Scots, abdicated. In 1847, Brigham Young settled in Utah, and today is a holiday in the state of Utah. It's called Pioneer Day. In 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific, carrying our first astronauts to land on the moon. And rolling back a little bit further, in 1783, Simón Bolívar was born. But the fact that he was born on that day means that it is really an Independence Day type celebration in the countries of Ecuador, Colombia, Bolivia, and Venezuela. And with that, it is just about 1:30, and I'm going to ring my little bell. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone. Great meeting today. Bye.